Cool. So, Tony, another question that we receive all the time, some version of this question. And honestly, it's a question I kind of get annoyed by because I receive it so much.
Right.
How long does it take to be fluent in English?
Yeah, man. Indeed. Both have to take a sip of our beverage before we tackle that one.
Yeah. So I think an easy way to start here is obviously a lot of people have different interpretations of what is fluency.
Yeah.
So do you just want to kind of give your take on how you view fluency, if you even think that's a valid concept to begin with?
Yeah. Totally legit question for sure. And there's a lot of good stuff to talk about it. When first thing preface that comes to mind, I do feel a bit that the word fluency is a cliche.
For sure.
Like, I'm speaking English right now and I know what I'm saying. At least for the next few seconds, I kind of know where I'm going. So I'm speaking fluently, but even in my own native language, you might catch me going, like there's, and am I no longer fluent? I mean, it's moment by moment for one thing.
Yeah.
Are we talking how fluid it comes out? I mean, that's okay. If that's the tool of measuring how fluent you are, then it's like a meter that bounces up and down as much as a sound volume level thing pops up and down as you. I mean, I'm fluent right now, and sometimes I'm not as fluent. Some days I feel like I can speak foreign languages like a beast, and then other days I'm like, dude, what's kind of going on? And that's the same with your native language. So it
Absolutely.
can be a bit of a cliche. I feel like the word fluency is to language as the word authentic is to Mexican restaurants.
Yeah, that's
every
awesome.
restaurant is authentic, even if it's like Kraft cheese, like on a bagel.
Yeah,
it's like obligatory, like it must be. So everyone's talking about fluency. Anyways, just want to get that off my chest.
Yeah, no, I think those are very valid points. And I think where this question really comes from a lot of times, two things. I think the idea of fluency is just the stereotype, like you study in the United States or you study somewhere to learn a foreign language, and then you come back and everyone's like, hey, are you fluent? Do you speak Spanish fluently? And people
did you get your fluency license?
Yeah. Can you drive the fluency car?
Correct.
And then I think a more practical way that people are actually trying to express this in this question is, how much work am I going to have to put into this endeavor of learning a new language?
Yeah, man.
So feel free to take those as you wish.
I personally have. So I see a spectrum there's spectrums everywhere. I see this spectrum in terms of defining fluency. One end of the spectrum being, well, this person can talk about everything there is to talk about. He's for sure fluent. I mean, Foster's for sure fluent in English. There's that one standard. Now, it's easy for people to imagine that standard. Like anyone can think of their most beautiful, idealized idea of what fluency means. That's not hard to visualize. What can be hard to visualize is the other end of the spectrum, and how could you still be fluent, or even just at your best, like at your personal best in this moment, even if you're not that wonderful vision of what I think fluency must mean. Everyone else is fluent except for me. I don't, you know what I mean? That right. Feeling where you're never quite there. So what I like to do is I like to visualize and articulate the other end of the spectrum, the side of the spectrum that's not so easy to visualize sometimes, right? And so just pushing things to the ultimate extreme to illustrate that. Here's my feeling on what fluency can be. Let's pretend that all I ever need to say in English, I live in I don't know how this would happen, but pretend all I ever need to say, I pick up the phone, or I say, ticket, please, thank you, ticket, please, thank you, ticket, please, thank you. And then I go home and continue speaking my normal language. All I know how to say in English or the foreign language, is ticket, please, thank you, ticket, please, thank you. Here's the thing. If that's all I need to say, then if I can say that, I'm 100% fluent.
Yeah. Functional fluency.
For sure. And I'll take that extreme view, at least just to illustrate the point. If your feeling is that in order to be fluent, you need to be able to speak on 1 million things, then you will need to be able to speak on 1 million things to be fluent. If, unfortunately, your vision of fluency is that you must need to be able to speak on infinite amount of things, then you will always be infinitely far away, because no matter how fast you fly toward infinity, you're never at infinity.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
So instead of that, I'm just going to think about this. What's that one thing that I want to talk about? Maybe just hello to start with. All right, that's fine. That's all. That's my expectation. It's like almost a Zen thing. It's like if you never expect anything, you're never disappointed. So all I'm gonna expect is just one or two things, and once I can say those, then I'm up and running.
Right.
Then I'll build. So I'll let the need. It's a numerator denominator thing. It's like, okay, I got 10 things I want to talk about. I can speak on 9 of them. I'm 9%. 9 out of 90% fluent. You see what I'm saying? So I'm keeping the expectation low.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the
And
key to happiness.
building upon with what I need.
Yeah. The key to happiness is low expectations.
There you go.
Yeah. So the way I kind of see this is I like to view fluency kind of in stages they can be disparate or somewhat linear. So, for example, when I was starting out in Portuguese, everyone was asking me the same questions, like, what are you doing here?
Right.
Like, isn't it cooler in the US? What do you think about Rio? Who's your soccer team? Those things. I got very fluent in that very basic level of conversation pretty quickly.
Right.
And then after you do that, it's like, okay, where do I go from here? And then you kind of tackle your next level, and it can be moving off to the left and you're talking about sports or something, or you're talking about language.
Right.
Yeah.
I call that my routine, and I think of it. Speaking of comedians, I think of that as a comedian's routine, which is made up of bits. And when a comedian writes a new bit, they have to try the bit out like a bunch of times on the locals circuit before they put it in the Netflix special. And then by the time they're ready, they have this collection of bits, and that's definitely their routine. Now they can change the order. They can go here, they can go there in the routine. They can tie it together differently, but generally they have that routine. And I think that's a major strategy point. I don't think that's some sort of weird cheat or that's not sustainable, that's not really what you should do. No, that's exactly what you should do. I think children learning their first language, native speakers, I think build one routine at a time. I mean, children are fluent at talking about when they're hungry and thirsty, for example, not necessarily talking about quantum physics. That's fine. You cross that bridge when you come to it. So yeah, I'm into just building the routine, drawing from the routine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, crazy dog. I think the stand-up comic analogy is, I really see no holes in that analogy at all. Because if you think about a stand-up comic, first of all, they're just, they're thinking of something funny. It's like a very basic idea. And then they start saying it to people, maybe their friends, and then they start using it on stage.
Right.
And then eventually they have these collections of like micro routines that they've memorized. They fit them into an entire hour, which they have some level of improvisation. They can move back and forth, bounce it off the audience. And then after they finish that perfect hour and it's on Netflix or HBO or whatever, the next year they have to start all over again and make up new jokes and shit,
Right.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, exactly. See, I find that paradoxically, the more you invest in a routine, the quicker you actually become improvisational.
Exactly.
Right. You think that's, I can't just memorize everything. Well, just memorize now until you get to the point where you break free. And the quicker you get your routine squared away and building and growing, the faster you become improvisational, where you no longer have to rely on the routine.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't even think it should be. I do think it is somewhat paradoxical, but it's so common in everything we do. If we acquire any new skill, if you're learning to play basketball or something, you can't like drive to the hoop with your left hand before knowing how to like dribble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You gotta fake it until you make it.
Exactly. Cool. So I think we didn't even touch on the question of how long does it take to become fluent. And I think that's a good thing, because I think that is at least the wrong way to frame the question.
I think so. I can say this: if you're taking years to feel good, then your method might be off.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that you often find approaches that have people going, I studied Spanish all 4 years in high school, but now I don't know anything at all. And it's like, it's not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying it's the approach, but nevertheless, if it's taken years, I'd say there's a problem in my own personal expectations for my students. I want us going back and forth with some conversation pretty soon. It might be very simple conversation, but I want to get the ball rolling soon.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah, I think if you apply that logic to any other part of your life, like I'm going to work in this company for 4 years. And if it's terrible and I'm not learning anything and I'm not like getting a raise,
yeah.
after 4 years, I'm just going to say, well, that didn't work. That's just a weird way to approach it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's never too late to switch up the methodology. But if I don't know, if pressed to put a timeline on something, I'd say within a few months you want to be feeling good. If you're not conversing at least a bit in a few months, then you're probably not conversing enough.
Yeah,